Alright, so we're just gonna leave this one right here, sitting on the shelf in social media land whenever the state comes back with a response to Kathleen Zellner's motion. Now, over the past 6.5 years since Zellner has taken on Steven Avery's post-conviction appellate file, I've been able to predict every response to every motion. And I'm going to give you my prediction for the newest motion. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty. And let's meow with the kitty. Don't even go there. So, what we have here is a motion for immediate relief, either by evidentiary hearing or a new trial in general. And Zellner believes that she hits the four corners of the third party Denny. And in any other state, I think her motion would be pretty succinct. Yet, we're talking about political warfare here. You're not going to trade a Steven Avery and a Bobby Dassey for one Bobby Dassey. Okay? And so, the loophole artist, as I call Miss Zellner, she finds a back door, she does her stuff for the Constitution, and her stuff is magic. Now, I'm not downplaying what she's done for other people in other cases, but there's just been so much blowing of the wrong whistles in Steven Avery's case. Like, can we get anybody on Steven Avery's behalf to step up and say honestly how crazy the political era of his time was? Okay, that man, when he is exonerated in 2003, September 11, he becomes the most talked about being in Wisconsin at the Madison, Wisconsin level. Now, Madison, Wisconsin is where the state capital is, and it's where all your legislation goes from this to this and dissipates for constitutional beliefs in America. And so, by trying to bring Bobby Dassey into the mix, there's one thing that Kathleen Zellner is missing that's majorly important. All the evidence that comes into the Hallback case is alleged to be planted by Bobby Dassey at this point. And that's a theory. But what is happening factually, all the evidence brought into the Hallback case lines up in the political realm with everything they were trying to prevent causing wrongful convictions in the Avery Commission. DNA contamination, tunnel vision, jailhouse snitching, statute of limitations on rapes, and then you have your recording of a minor, the new insight on child investigations and interrogations and the way you record minors, and it's mandated to be recorded. All this was going on in the Avery Commission. All these factors come to light in the Hallback case. Now, it's very, very important to say that we have Bobby planting blood in the RAV4 on Zellner's account. Steven Avery, in his new motion, has now said that he believes that law enforcement did not plant the blood evidence, but yet then we have different stuff getting planted at different times. We know for a fact Bobby Dassey did not plant the bullets fragments, items FL and FK. Okay? And then we know for a fact Bobby Dassey had nothing to do with the coerced confession of Brendan Dassey. And it doesn't matter which theory you believe in, to bring all the junk science that is in the Hallback investigation into light and collaborate it with a guilty verdict, you need to have a Brendan Dassey confession, or else all of that evidence is just junk. It's circumstantial. It's junk. Nothing even ties to Brendan Dassey. Okay? So, let's begin with the third party Denny, just so I can show you how it aligns politically where Bobby Dassey is concerned. So, I've always have wondered exactly why we have the Scott Tatage alibi and the Bobby Dassey alibi. Okay, where they just alibi each other the day that Teresa Hallback visits. And it hit me, Jerry Buting and Norman Gahn wrote and helped to author the third-party Denny motion. There's emails from Norman Gahn to Mark Gundrum, and Keith Finley and Jerry Buting are both tagged in it, and it's specifically about the third-party Denny and an intentional homicide, and it's prior to Teresa Hallback ever disappearing. And it basically states inculpation and exculpating a defendant, or incriminating a defendant, if the biologic material links the defendant to the victim in an intentional homicide. You cannot have a third-party Denny because of the biological material link. And they wrote this to make it easier for the courts to incriminate a defendant. Now, Jerry Buting will go off and act like, hey, we couldn't bring Bobby Dassey up, we couldn't bring Ryan Hillegas up, we couldn't bring any other third-party Denny. And he plays dumb to this notion, but it's written in the Avery Task Force Commissions why you can't pull up a third-party Denny. And that's because it became legislation. Now, if you put Norman Gahn as the prosecutor and Jerry Buting as a defense attorney, and they have all these political background, high Madison deep state rooted connections with Steven Avery's exoneration, and they're working behind the scenes in Madison, Wisconsin, in these commissions, sitting with prosecutors and other law enforcement and the DCI and state crime lab and senators, and they're trying to write bills to save the state money. Then when they're defending and prosecuting Steven Avery's case, guess what's happening? That Scott Tadage and Bobby Dassey alibi, if all these years later, your post-conviction appellate attorney like Kathleen Zellner and Jerry Budin writes an affidavit in August of 2022 and says, hey, yeah, they wouldn't let me do a third-party Denny suspect, but blah, 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 blah. That was designed purposely by those political experts during that trial to keep a post-conviction attorney on Avery Road. You know, I've always said, look with better eyes, look beyond Avery Road, but Kathleen Zellner fell for the bait. She's going after a third-party Denny that the state's not going to give her, and Jerry Budin and Norm Gahn specifically know why. And I can show you this email very plainly, very clearly. So this is an uphill battle for Zellner because everything is a rug sweep. Okay, if you follow the political, if you go down a rabbit hole, it's all factual basis. Everything that happened in the political realm, you have to have recorded minutes of these commission hearings. That was a state law, and they are recorded. So you got to look at the picture like this, guys. That political inference in Steven Avery's life was brought into Hallback's death. So Bobby Dassey, if he's planting evidence, isn't it ironic that it's hitting all of the political parallels of Steven Avery's commission that was created by Mark Gundrum? It just should not be happening by coincidence for Bobby Dassey. So, getting into what Kathleen Zellner has to overcome with the Bobby Dassey, I've predicted everything, every motion response by the state for 6.5 years straight. Y'all don't listen. No one listen. It's because I'm such a bad guy or something, and I will verbally attack you or jump down your throat. You know, I joke around with Paul Capaldi a lot that I am Lord Voldemort of the Making a Murderer series, Who Shall Not Be Named. Like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I can't join your little Making a Murderer reindeer games. But that's what the state is playing with Kathleen Zellner. Reindeer games. She's not going to get the desired effect that she wants until someone like Keith Finley, Stephen Drizzen, Jerry Budin, Richard Leo, Mike Malmestat, anybody that was sitting on that Avery task force who is an attorney that is supposed to be fighting wrongful convictions, we're not going to get Stephen and Brendan out until one of those people blow a whistle. And to date, Jerry Budin, Stephen Drizzen, or Keith Finley, three of the biggest people sitting on it, have not done it. Even Stephen Glenn sit on the Avery Commission. That was Steven Avery's civil suit attorney, and even his livelihood was threatened, and he hasn't blown a whistle. So, going forward with Jerry Budin's affidavit in August 2022, Jerry Budin is rug sweeping. If you follow the political infrastructure of a frame job, then Jerry Buden is rug sweeping for the state. He's definitely not blowing a whistle. And we need that whistle blown, okay? So, everybody needs to have an open mind. Dassey Memorialized will be a timeline of the political event. Dassey Memorialized is going to be a book I'm going to release here very shortly. It is If Steven Avery Was Framed. It is how it happened, okay? And they want to kick up bones and say, hey, I never show any documentation. No, it's going to be specifically documented down to the T. Everything I go online and talk about has documented sources. It's all documented. It's just that some of these people in these groups, checking convictions, foul play, these people have minuscule brain power. Like, their brains don't connect dots, okay? They don't realize the politics in the case. And you have to realize that your Department of Justice is ran by politics. Police officers, police policies, and policies are written by legislation members and signed into act by the governor of the state. And everything that happened in the Hallback investigation was written into legislation by those acting on the legislation's behalf in the Avery Commission. Even the recording of minors in July 2005, when the Wisconsin Supreme Court mandated that we record juveniles, the judge gave the task of the policies for recording juveniles to the Avery Commission. Okay? July of 2005. This was given the task to the Avery Commission. Bobby Dassey doesn't have all that information in his back pocket, but the political attorneys and law enforcement members, DCI members, senators, Attorney General's office, state crime lab members, who all sit on this Avery Commission as hand-picked members, they do have this information. So before you take any junk science, you have to have a state crime lab who already knows the rules to manipulate any junk evidence that hits the Hallback case. And then the only way you can make sense of that junk science in court is with a premeditated Brendan Dassey gets coerced, I helped Uncle Steve kill Teresa Hallback story. And Bobby didn't have access to this stuff. Bobby Dassey didn't know a hill of beans about the legislation. Okay? But that's why I'm saying Kathleen Zellner's motion, if she wanted to do anything powerful and gripping and life-changing for Steven Avery, for his freedom, for his liberty, for his constitution, you blow a whistle on the way that the Avery Commission manipulated the Hallback case. I'm telling you, it runs parallel. Everything in the Avery Commission gets spoken about at a meeting, and within a couple of days it's all pulled on into the Hallback investigation. I've given you reference to this on the February 23rd, 2006 meeting of how Jerry Buden asked his Stephen Drizzen to elaborate on what the courts look at for accepting false confessions. And Steven Drizzen on February 23rd, 2006 says, does the perpetrator give information to the cops that only the cops know about, that the publics do not know about, which that information was no one knew Teresa Hallback was shot in the head, only law enforcement and the true perpetrator at this time. And then they feed Brendan Dassey, who shot her in the head. Brendan Dassey says he did. And then Drizzen is talking about, does that information lead police to new evidence? And so they go get a warrant and they find items FK and FL. So February 23rd, Drizzen and Buting are in a Avery Commission hearing. They're talking about false confessions. 4 days later, it becomes Brendan Dassey's life. 4 days later. We're not talking months later. We're not talking weeks later. We're not talking a year later. We're talking 4 days. It's everything that got signaled on a roundtable discussion in Milwaukee, where that commission hearing was held, sitting with prosecutors, law enforcement, state crime lab members. Drizzen and Jerry were wolves in sheep's clothing, sitting amongst wolves. And they've never blown a whistle on anything because, if you go back to that February 23rd commission, you see exactly how Wiegert and Fassbender were trained a hybrid Nelson and Reed technique to use on Brendan Dassey, yet Steven Drizzen has never brought up Neil Nelson. Jerry Buting has never brought up Neil Nelson. And these are the whistles you got to blow. If you blow a whistle on the facts, Steven Avery can go home. If you don't blow a whistle on the facts, if you keep letting Avery Road be the canvas that Zellner is painting a unconstitutional method on, then he's never going home. What is unconstitutional is at Madison, Wisconsin. It's at the state capitol level. It's being done and orchestrated by Peg Lautenschlager's Attorney General office. And it's being conducted by political experts and witness experts in the Wisconsin region who have high pull with law enforcement. And so the policies are being policed in the new Avery bill. And now in any post-conviction appellate, they're all being rug swept by the same expert attorneys and prosecutors, Norm Gahn, Jerry Buting, who helped write the bill. Keith Finley sit there. He knows everything that went on at these meetings. We don't hear Keith Finley blowing a whistle. We don't hear Jerry Buting blowing a whistle. We don't see Steven Drizzen blowing a whistle. That's because they're involved. If you blow a whistle on the politics, everything starts unraveling. But here we have August 2022, Jerry Buting is writing an affidavit to keep everything on the Avery Road canvas. We cannot free Steven and Brendan at all if we stay on Avery Road. That's why you have to go beyond Avery Road. You have to grow some balls, let them drop, and blow a whistle. Or Steven rots in prison. Brendan, 2045. The kid's still got 23 years left. So, Scott Tadage, Bobby Dassey, alibying each other. That was a strategic move done by the prosecution and the defense together. And I say the defense was in on it because Jerry Budin helped author the third-party biological material portion of the Avery bill. If the biological material links the defendant to the victim, you don't get a third party, Denny. And then Jerry Budin plays dumb for all these years of, oh, they wouldn't let me. You know good and well why they wouldn't let you. You authored the bill and the legislation, Jerry. So, with that being said, writing that affidavit, August of 2022, giving post-conviction appellate counsel insight into Bobby instead of blowing a whistle of what was happening in those Avery commissions, Jerry. I now know that you're definitely helping the rug sweep for the state of Wisconsin. I called it in my book 2017. I said there will be a day that you specifically go for third-party Denny suspect and you start helping post-conviction appellate attorneys go that route. And since they're going that route, guess what's happening? Steven's not getting out. Okay? Now, there's so many things we can discuss here about Bobby's involvement. Everybody's like, Bobby's the murderer, Bobby's the murderer. Oh, Kathleen Zellner has an amazing motion. Well, in any other state, any other time and place in America, but Madison, Wisconsin, this motion would be great. But you have Attorney General Josh Kaul, who is former Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager's son, who's at all mean is going to be all over this, and they're going to be very dismissive of this motion. And so I want to attack the third party Denny before I start attacking the Brady violations. Now, the third party Denny, you're not going to trade a Steven and a Brendan for one Bobby. It's not going to happen. So instead of having a third party Denny, the state's going to do a third party accomplice. Okay? And that's how you dismiss Bobby's activity as being the sole killer, because Sowinski's pushing the RAV4 on the 5th, November 5th, Saturday morning, is when Sowinski sees Bobby pushing the RAV4. We still have the state alleging Teresa Hallback was murdered on October 31st, meaning Bobby was on the property with Steven, and we have a Steven saying that at noontime, right before noon, he walks over to Bobby's and talks to Bobby, goes back home, Teresa comes, she gets murdered. Then we have Steven saying he walked back over to Bobby's and Bobby was gone. Bobby had left. Okay? Hypothetically, all the state has to do is write that whether Bobby planted evidence or not, it doesn't change the date or the time stamp when Teresa Hallback was murdered. Okay? Just because Teresa's cell phone's in the RAV4 and the RAV4 leaves the property doesn't mean that Teresa Hallback left the property. Hallback belonging to Vice left the property. All the state has to do to be dismissive is say that Steven manipulated Bobby, and Bobby was an accomplice to him and with him and Brendan in helping to murder Teresa Hallback. Then when Steven goes to Cribbets Saturday morning, hey Bobby, kind of stay behind and help clean some stuff up. And then Bobby might have a change of heart, hypothetically, and leave stuff out for Steven to get framed. Okay? And that's all the state has to do is like, hey, Bobby was like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. My uncle did it. And here, instead of destroying all the evidence, I want to leave you a key in his bedroom. And I want to put some blood in his vehicle. And so Bobby killing Teresa versus Bobby planting evidence does not change the timestamp for death for Teresa Hallback. Meaning, in the state's response to Kathleen Zellner's motion, bringing Bobby up as a third-party Denny suspect isn't credible because it doesn't do anything with the outcome of how Teresa Hallback died. You still have Steven Avery, Bobby Dassey on the property, okay? You still have them on the property, and Bobby and Steven are communicating right before Teresa Hallback gets to the property. With that evidence, the state can deflect Bobby acted alone because we have Bobby and Steven communication right before. Okay? And if Steven is saying Bobby left the property right after, the state's going to use that as, oh no, they weren't there. Steven watched Bobby drive away, so Steven is now alibying Bobby. Okay? Because Bobby left, and that separates the two. This is how I would deflect a third party Denny motion if I was the state. Okay? I would not allow the third party Denny to be accepted because Bobby and Steven are on the property. They're in communication, and both of them are technically the last people to see Teresa alive. In the state's theory, in their own words, Bobby watches her walk towards Steven's house, and Steven watches her drive away. And so if I have any inclination, and I am the state, I'm gonna say, oh, okay, maybe for the past 10 plus years, Bobby Dassey hypothetically got away with this, and maybe we should have charged him as an accomplice with Steven, Uncle Steven, and Brother Brendan. But there's no smoking gun. Just like there's no smoking gun for Brendan Dassey except for his own confession that was coerced. The evidence, there's no smoking gun evidence to link Brendan. There's no smoking gun evidence to link Bobby. We do have Steven's blood in the RAV4. But again, if Zellner wants to make up the theory of why and how that blood got there is because Bobby framing Steven, it doesn't make sense. Because if you're going to frame Steven, you don't leave the computer in your house, and you don't do the searches in your own house and burn every other technical device around, but keep the computer. It's like you took all the evidence and put it around Steven, but if you're typing away and you're Bobby Dassey, you would get rid of that computer as well. So, because you know that the whole alleged frame and murder job is on your computer, and Bobby didn't get rid of the computer, so we know he's kind of oblivious in my book to anything that was on that computer. I say the hard drive was planted, but again, coming from this state, I don't see Bobby framing Steven. I don't see Bobby killing Teresa Hallback. If Bobby had any involvement, it would be an accomplice to Steven, and then Steven helped to alibi Bobby so they weren't together killing him. The cops zeroed in on Brendan Dassey with a confession. Bobby narrowly escapes. So the third party, Denny versus third party accomplice, the state is going to be more willing, believe you me, to put Bobby Dassey doing the deed with Brendan and Steven. And that's how they're going to deflect the third party motion. They know the insides outs of the case. They know what truly happened. They're in rug sweep mode. Bobby acting alone is not going to be believed by this state by any cost. You cannot let Brendan Dassey and Steven Avery go. And again, we have no smoking gun on evidence. We have an eyewitness testimony. We know how eyewitness testimonies are flawed. Okay. Sowinksy states that he saw Bobby Dassey and a bearded gentleman pushing the RAV4, but we don't have a photo of that. We do have Sowinksy making a phone call, but even if he's making a report of it, it's just like any other eyewitness in the Manitowoc phone calls or the Calumet County phone calls. Oh, we saw Teresa's RAV4 under the bridge over here. We saw Teresa Hallback taking a picture of a cow over here. We saw Teresa Hallback in the Winnebago Mental Institution over here. It's an eyewitness account. And eyewitness accounts in an appellate trial without evidence, without photographic evidence, without any record of any kind, is just that. Maybe you were mistaken. Maybe in the afterthought of stuff, maybe you just thought you saw who could be Bobby Dassey and the RAV4. But an eyewitness statement cannot be confirmed. Okay? Just isn't happening. There's no smoking gun in Sowinski's eyewitness statement. A lot of people called in. A lot of people called in making eyewitness statements, and we see where the lead went. Soon as we start getting biological evidence on Steven Avery, the eyewitness testimonies, you canvass as a law enforcement officer. You go door to door, you ask stuff, all the tips coming in, you get back to the person, and you tell them your story, and an eyewitness testimony in 99.99999% of these incidences, they were followed up on, but there's no collaboration to finalize and get a definite on what was seen. So Sowinksy is not 0.00001% of a miracle that's going to fit through the crack here. It's just not going to happen. So without the smoke and gun evidence, and it's just an eyewitness statement, and Sowinksy called in with everybody else, all these people claiming to see Teresa spotting. I mean, it's as good as dust in the wind, because there is no collaboration. It's a testimony, and this was a very huge case. You call once, and then you later down the road try to get back to the story. Even if you did see it, you know that Jerry Buden and Dean Strang took on the case, and it was high profile. And if you had information of seeing Bobby Dassey and a bearded gentleman, I mean, you go and you pound the door down to that law enforcement office and you say, hey, look, put me on the stand. And Tom Sowinksy does not do that. So this is where the state is going to attack that credibility. How come you come out all these years later? Oh, there's a $100,000 reward out too. Oh, okay, so now you're coming forth. Let's see how your eyewitness testimony holds up against seasoned veterans of the Wisconsin Department of Justice. An eyewitness testimony. I mean, if you want to talk about how Josh Call is protecting his mother, Peg Lautenschlager's initial rug sweeping of this case, you got to remember Peg Lautenschlager was the person who wrote the model policies on eyewitness testimonies after Steven was exonerated, okay? And Josh Call is going to be keen to everything about Sowinksy, about what he witnessed, okay? This is going to be a rug sweep from hell. Sowinski's testimony is dust in the wind. And I'm just coming at you from the state's perspective because I know the players who are going to be getting phone calls from Josh Call. Let me see that response before it goes out the door, young man, young lady. You best believe that Josh Call is going to be making phone calls on that response to that motion. They're going to be having little behind the door private meetings with crooked judges, crooked attorneys, crooked prosecutors. Do whatever you can to make Thomas Sowinski's testimony go away. And without a smoking gun evidence, and just eyewitness testimony, all these years later, Thomas Sowinski's testimony is gonna be dust in the wind. I hate to tell you, but that's where we're going with that. So you demolish Kathleen Zellner's RAV4 theory, okay? When you demolish that in a response, all that's left about the third party Denny is hypothetically if she was killed on October 31st, as the state is alleging, the state is not going to change their theory. No appellate court is going to buy any other theory of a time frame of where she was dead, because it's set forth to the court in the trial. It was established that she died on October 31st. We got one more problem. We know Steven Avery remained on the property. So, third party Denny, Bobby acted alone. Nope, Steven Avery's on the property. Bobby Dassey acted with his Uncle Steven and Brendan Dassey. And so, he narrowly escapes and gets away with it, because upon further review, Brendan Dassey started breaking down and gave confessions. And, like again, if I'm Josh Call and Co. from the Attorney General's office in Wisconsin Department of Justice in 2022, we're demolishing the jack shit rabbit out of this Kathleen Zellner motion to the fullest. And that is what we are doing, and that is what is going to be done. And I'm just giving you my prediction because I know how the state works. So, when you demolish Tom Sowinski's eyewitness account of Bobby Dassey pushing the RAV4, and then you have the timeline of death being October 31st, when Teresa Hallback visits the property, we know Steven Avery stayed on the property. The state is going to say Steven Avery went to Bobby right before she arrives, and then after she allegedly leaves, Steven Avery goes back by Bobby and says, oh, he left. And that is a chance for the state to give an alibi that Steven alibied Bobby because they worked together. They tried to separate their stuff. So now you can't have a third party Denny whatsoever, because Bobby, in hypothetical timeline, Steven never left the property. So if Teresa died, Bobby had to work with Uncle Steven. And that's how you remove Bobby as a third party Denny suspect and make him a third party accomplice with brother Brendan and Uncle Steve. And that's the way this is going to work, folks. There is no way that the state will trade a Steven Avery and a Brendan Dassey for one Bobby Dassey without smoking gun evidence. And there's no smoking gun evidence. We only have hypotheticals here. And to establish a third party Denny, you saw the four corners of what it takes in Kathleen Zellner's motion and Sowinski's eyewitness statement is going to crumble. And once that crumbles, there's no third party Denny established. So let's go forward with the Brady violations of introducing the computer hard drive. Okay? Now there's a lot of ways that this goes wrong. First of all, November 15th, Wiegert's prediction for Steven Avery's motive was porn, rape, torture, and bondage as the motive to kill Teresa Hallback. November 15th, 2005, Mark Wiegert takes out a warrant for Steven Avery's hard drive. Okay? If you notice in Kathleen Zellner's motion, November 15th comes up. Okay? Veely at the Grand Chutes Police Department is in charge of going through Steven Avery's hard drive. This is November 15th. There is an article that says porn, rape, torture, bondage is the motive. Sexual assault is the motive to kill Teresa Hallback. Okay? So, why I say the hard drive is planted is because March 1st, 4 months later, Brendan Dassey is coerced. And Brendan is, you got porn, torture, bondage, and rape coming from Brendan's mouth. Everything that Mark Wiegert predicted on November 15th is being backed up on March 1st by Brendan Dassey, yet Mark Wiegert and Fassbender don't get a warrant for the Dassey computer, the Dassey household computer, the Yonda household computer. It doesn't get taken out to get that computer. So, how do we have Mark Wiegert taking a warrant out on November 15th? 4 months later, Brendan Dassey on March 1st confirms it, but yet we don't get a warrant to grab his computer immediately. If that was the prediction for your MO and you're an investigator, you say, thanks, Brendan, for your cooperation, and we're going to go in and grab your computer now. You don't wait till April 21st, a month and 20 days later, to go in and get that computer and test that hard drive. And so now you have Fassbender for 13 plus years sit on the searches of that main CD of the hard drive that has porn, rape, murder, torture, bondage, everything that was Mark Wiegert's motive, MO, in November. Just 6 days after Steven Avery's arrested and his criminal complaint is amended. Okay? You went in looking for all that stuff in November. Brendan confirms it March, but you don't grab Brendan's computer or a computer Brendan has access to until April. And then Fassbender takes the DVD or the CD, puts it in a coat pocket. Now we're just going to make this disappear. See, if in the news when Brendan Dassey gives a confession, and on March 2nd when Ken Kratz is doing a press conference, you say, now we had suspicion on November 15th that this exact MO occurred and we pulled Steven Avery's hard drive. So today on March 2nd, we're going to pull Brendan Dassey's hard drive. You can't do that if you're the prosecution in this case, because it shows that Brendan was accomplice in November, like Sheriff Jerry Pagel stated. So, this is why I solely expressed that the hard drive was planted, and it was a backup in case the bullet doesn't get passed through, but the bullet gets passed through. And so hindsight is 20/20. They say Bobby's at home making all these searches. Well, I would say that when Veely is making these investigations on Steven Avery. I would say that somehow or another the planning of a secondary Dassey hard drive was being emulated and created at that same time, because Brendan Dassey was a suspect in November. They wanted to take down Brendan Dassey as Steve's accomplice in November, middle of November, November 15th. But the legislation changed, and they can't interview Brendan Dassey anymore until Wiegert and Fassbender have accredited course hours on Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager's model policy on the recording of minors. That was a legislative enactment that was founded by Jerry Buting and Stephen Drizzen and Keith Finley, and Brendan becomes untouchable for those 4 months until those accredited hours are completed. So they got 4 months to emulate a Yonda residence hard drive and plan it. The only thing is, on March 1st, when Brendan Dassey tells this story of how he helped chain her to the bed and rape, the prosecution can't go back to their November 15th article of what the motive was, because they're going to have questions and they're going to say, well, you thought that porn, torture, rape, and bondage was the motive November 15th. And here Brendan is confirming this. What happened for those 4 months that Brendan Dassey got away with this? And now all of a sudden, Brendan is confirming this. But you see how that would look odd if on March 1st and March 2nd, they grab Brendan Dassey's hard drive? They didn't grab the hard drive then. And it just shows that premeditated, November 15th, when Mark Wiegert does take out a warrant, they were going after Brendan and Steven November 15th. So Zellner really drops the ball on this hard drive. She severely drops the ball, because in any case, whoever made the searches on the hard drive, the warrant for Steven Avery's hard drive reflects everything Brendan Dassey said, and the Yonda residence hard drive should have been taken out on that date. And Kathleen Zellner should be arguing that there's no hard drive search for March 1st, but there is a hard drive search for Steven's residence 4 months earlier on November 15th. Okay? And everything that they were looking for November 15th, Brendan Dassey confirms March 1st. But they don't grab Brendan Dassey's computer March 1st. They can't, because it's going to show on the timeline of the prosecution that we have a 4 month gap. And Kathleen Zellner is dropping the ball on this 4 month gap, because that 4 month gap shows that everything is premeditated on the state's timeline, but they're not allowed to talk to Brendan Dassey due to the legislation making accredited course hours of training in juvenile interrogations. They cannot go back and talk to Brendan Dassey for 4 months. Okay? And that's why we have this 4 month gap, is because Wiegert and Fassbender have to take these accredited courses. They have to hybrid technique, the Nelson and the Reed, and make their appearance memorialized on camera. And so they have to abandon the porn, rape, torture motive from November 15th. And they can't pull the hard drive immediately when Brendan Dassey confesses on March 1st. Okay? They can't do it because it backs up their timeline, and they say, oh, this was supposed to happen November 15th, but you're doing it March 1st because Brendan Dassey is just now able to be coerced. And that's why they let a month and 20 days go by, and then, we got this other CD here, let's hide it, because if that 4-month gap gets out that Wiegert predicted everything Brendan Dassey did November 15th, but we don't call him out on it March 1st and get a hard drive to confirm it like we went to confirm it with Steven Avery's hard drive, it blows a hole in the prosecution story for meditation. That's the only reason that Mark Wiegert hides that CD from the Dassey hard drive. It's because it's planted. It was a backup in case items FK and FL fail. Now, Kathleen Zellner putting the blame on Bobby Dassey for those searches versus the 4-month gap from the prosecution. I would be going after that 4-month gap, and I would be suggesting that that hard drive is planted evidence with everything else. Okay? And I'm saying this in the light and aspect that if Bobby Dassey was making those searches and premeditating a murder, okay, he would have burned that information. He would have burned that computer. Or if you're the state's star witness, you say, yeah, Uncle Steven was over here making searches too on the computer. That's all you had to do. And so I don't think a murderer would keep the evidence in their house. Now, we start hearing this torture theory, this jailhouse snitch story of torture and everything. So, I mean, if you're an 18-year-old kid, if you're a 17-year-old kid, whoever's making these searches in this house, could Uncle Steven be doing this? Let me, E-Bombs World, and there were some sites at that time that were pretty big that you could get death pictures and be like, let me see exactly what my Uncle Steven is doing. We already know at these time periods that we have police officers talking about all of this stuff. So, I mean, even Brendan Dassey on November 10th, Brendan Dassey, Kim Skorlinski, comes in and says a lot of stuff to Brendan. Brendan, on November 6th, is the first person to bring up any rape whatsoever. So, Brendan in the household could be talking about rape with his brothers. I mean, it's just simple stuff, known stuff that could be being searched. Doesn't mean that you searched it because you killed a person. Now, the reason I otherwise ascertained that the hard drive was planted is because November 15th, back to like September, there's some of this stuff that's been deleted, yet the searches are there. The search inquiry is there, but the material is deleted. And November 15th is a big day because November 15th is the day that they took a warrant for Steven Avery's hard drive in his residence, send it to Veely, at the Grand Chutes Police Department, and I just say from that point on, November 15th, that hard drive was emulated and crafted by the Department of Justice. And if you don't think that hard drives can be manipulated, talk to some code writers. Okay? Talk to some code writers. Let's talk about manipulation of computers and hard drives. There was 3 other laptop sources of Hunter Biden's laptop. Okay, we know the Hunter Biden story, that his laptop made it in the pawn shop and they got into it, and you see all these emails and searches and stuff. Well, 3 other laptops after the date circulated, oh, this is the Hunter Biden laptop, and you can download all the files on the computer, and they were backdated, and they look 100% genuine with the created material, but we know that they're fakes. But you can pass it over if you wanted to. Now, that's the same way with emulating any hard drive, manufacturing any date. Computer does what you tell it. If you tell the computer it's 1903, the computer is going to believe it's 1903, and it's going to start processing a time frame from then. It's not hard. If you have any computer skills, like deep state computer skills, you can do anything on a computer. Okay? And if you're deleting November 15th material, I would say there's some origination that hard drive is not the actual hard drive, but an emulated hard drive. That's just my thoughts on it, because there's no way you're gonna burn everything else as evidence but keep that computer in your house if you're Bobby and you done it. And I just don't see Bobby Dassey as being the murderer. As far as the Brady, with everything on this computer linking Bobby Dassey, hindsight 2020, Bobby's the only person home searching. Once you destroy the Sowinksy eyewitness testimony of what he's going to testify in court and what he wrote on an affidavit that he saw, there's no Brady violation, because the third party Denny really helps the state go ahead and destroy the Brady on this. And evidentiary hearing or a new trial itself, the evidentiary hearing, eyewitness testimony is not great enough. Without a smoking gun, third party Denny is going to go to a third party accomplice. And as far as Brady violations, I think the state is going to go as far away as that hard drive as possible, because I think they're the originators, and they're just going to say that it's inconclusive because the household knew of things that Steven Avery was capable of, and they were just searching possibly for things that Steven Avery has done. Okay? The hard drive is going to be dismissed. Specifically because you didn't add November 15th hard drive of porn, rape, murder. Okay? And on the back burner there, the MO for November 15th can connivingly be written in for the MO of April 21st removal. It's just switching the MO from Steven to Brendan, because on March 1st we have a switch that goes either way past our future. I'm gonna be really anxious to see how they handle the hard drive information, and to me, on the response, I'll be able to make a conclusive determination if they did plan it. Because if they just dismiss the November 15th motive of taking Steven Avery's hard drive out because it's porn, rape, torture, etc., then it shows me that it was planted, because they're trying to hide the fact that that motive was all taken out November 15th. But you got to ask yourself, how come Steven Drizzen has never brought this up? How come Jerry Buden has never brought this up? That everything they look for on November 15th, Brendan Dassey talks about it March 1st, but they don't get the computer. See, these are questionable inferences in time on a timeline, that if you have all these political expert attorneys working on this case, you can't F up to this magnitude. And if you're effing up to this magnitude, it's because you're not blowing a whistle. So the state overall, in dismissing KZ's motion, it is a very, very possible thing to dismiss without having an evidentiary trial, new trial, anything. You're not going to get Steven Avery a new trial. Now, if you blow whistles on some of the things that Keith Finley, Jerry Buden, and even Steven Drizzen should be blowing whistles on, but they're not, and if you're Kathleen Zellner and you're writing motions about this, you can pinpoint a pretty credible frame job versus Bobby Dassey killing Teresa Hallback. Now, again, the way I approach this is with a motive aspect. And for the motive for anybody to kill Teresa Hallback on Avery Road versus the motive for the state of Wisconsin to frame Steven Avery for 36 million reasons, the motive, the weight of the MO goes to a frame job. Okay? Especially when all of the Avery Commission politics or wrongful convictions are pulled into the Hallback investigation. And again, you can't make any of that junk science stick until you coerce Brendan Dassey, and Bobby Dassey did not have that information in his back pocket. Bobby Dassey doesn't know that the criminal crime lab is going to play ball. I look at it this way. If the crime lab was truthful and it was if they were being honest and Steven Avery wasn't being framed, and let's say Bobby took the blood from the sink and he puts it in a RAV4, and layman term, we see a cut on Steven's finger, so if he's turning the car key, you get blood on the thing. But in layman's terms, with our layman eyes, we see a Q-tip swab, and we see with a Q-tip. And if the state crime lab was honest, they would say, hey, you know, as far as someone framing Steven Avery, we do see a Q-tip swab So Bobby Dassey did do this, but they're not going to put that on Bobby Dassey. The state is going to stay wholeheartedly alleged that come from Steven Avery. Now, a great crime lab personnel who was honest and wasn't being paid off, they would say, yep, this come from a Q-tip. It's not going to happen. It hasn't happened. They can't back up on their theory. And that's how I know Bobby Dassey didn't plant that blood, is because law enforcement planted that blood. In theory, we have Bobby going into the trailer, coming back out and planting it, and now we have Kathleen Zellner getting Steven Avery to say, I no longer believe that law enforcement planted the blood, but Bobby Dassey planted it. But yet, we have in the Calumet County Sheriff's Office files investigation report that they swabbed the sink with a Q-tip of Steven Avery's blood, and they swabbed the bathroom floor with a Q-tip. So, if it's applied by a Q-tip on the ignition switch, we already have factual evidence of law enforcement swabbing the blood in the bathroom versus theoretical evidence of Bobby Dassey getting it. Now, I don't know about you, but I work on facts. And the facts is law enforcement was in possession of the bathroom sink blood and the bathroom floor blood, and they swabbed it. So trying to put Bobby Dassey in that bathroom, theoretically, I'm going to go with the law enforcement swabbed the RAV4 and planted it. It's the same thing with the hair being found in the back of the RAV4, okay? 3.5 hours after Karen Hallback makes a phone call on November 3rd that her daughter has disappeared, Wiegert is in Teresa Hallback's house. He picks up Teresa Hallback's hairbrush and he takes out strands of hair from her hairbrush, puts them in a little plastic bag, and says, we'll keep these in case DNA evidence is needed. Now, this is on record. She's only been missing several hours, and they're already taking DNA in the form of hair if needed. Now, hair strands are found in the back of Teresa Hallback's RAV4, but they've yet to been grouped with the rest of the hairs in those bags, and blood DNA and hair DNA is going to hold up a little bit better than blood DNA after all these years, and you can date hair samples. But Kathleen Zellner has failed to take the hair strands and group them with the other hairs in the other little baggie from Teresa Hallback's hairbrush, in case DNA is needed. So, as far as the blood sample in the back of the RAV4, you got state crime lab manipulating everything. We no longer have access to the RAV4. Is that blood sample really Hallback's, or did they just put the hair and test the strain of the hair to say, oh yeah, it's got to be Hallback's blood because here's Hallback's hair? See, you can use the same blood sample in the back of the RAV4 and in the front of the RAV4. The same blood source. And then as long as you got hair to put in the back on that blood, you can manipulate the blood source and say, oh, this is Teresa Hallback's blood back here, and this is Steven Avery's blood up here. And we know this is Teresa Hallback's blood back here because we have her hair. But that hair could have been planted by Wiegert, or anybody that Wiegert chose to give that hair to. But we factually know that he had access to Teresa Hallback's hair from the hairbrush prior to the RAV4 being found. So with that being said, I don't see Bobby Dassey planting Steven Avery's blood in the front of the RAV4. There's questionable inference about the hair in the back of the RAV4. And then we have law enforcement planting sweat DNA under the hood latch. You're not going to have two planners planning evidence in one vehicle. So, I mean, I see what Kathleen Zellner did by getting Steven Avery to dismiss the police officers planted blood in the RAV4. But then that takes us back to, why the hell would Bobby plant evidence of the RAV4 if you're alleging that police officers swabbed the hood latch with Steven Avery's sweat? And that's a hurdle that she did not cross in her latest motion. And that's going to come up in this motion, is that even though Steven Avery alleges that law enforcement didn't plant blood in the RAV4, that it was Bobby Dassey who goes into his bathroom, comes back out with his blood when he went to Menards and plants the blood in the RAV4. Steven Avery is still alleging that law enforcement, however, did plant blood or did plant sweat under the hood latch. So we still have defense for Steven Avery confused. Steven Avery is still alleging that law enforcement manipulated the front of the RAV4, but Bobby Dassey manipulated the interior of the front of the RAV4. And they're gonna be able to use that to say they never abandoned the theory on the hood latch swab. Okay? And then they're going to say, well, if they're saying law enforcement didn't plant any blood inside the RAV4 now, and we don't believe Bobby planted it, because when did Bobby get access to Steven's sweat to plant the hood latch? So now you got to have Bobby planting the hood latch sweat. See, there's things that, little small things like this, that Kathleen doesn't look at. You don't have a theory that Bobby Dassey got Steven Avery's sweat to plant under the hood latch, but yet Steven Avery has now abandoned the theory that law enforcement planted blood inside of the RAV4. So if I'm the state and I'm looking at this motion, I'm going to dismiss Bobby planting evidence in that RAV4, because Bobby doesn't have access to Steven's sweat to plant under the hood latch. And now this can all be used against Steven on a motion to dismiss it, because Steven dismissed law enforcement himself as planning anything on the RAV4. And if Steven doesn't give a theory to how Bobby Dassey got his sweat to plant under the hood, then state's dismissing Bobby from planting evidence in that RAV4. And these are the little teeny tiny things that Kathleen Zellner doesn't think about. So how do you go get Steven Avery to say law enforcement didn't plan anything? Look, the whole front, interior, the hood latch, and the hairs in the back have more weight of law enforcement messing with that RAV4 than Bobby Dassey. We have a hood latch that gets sweat on it from supposed groin swabs. Okay? Then all of a sudden, Steven Avery, we know that law enforcement swabs the bathroom blood. It's on record. But all of a sudden, Steven Avery dismisses the RAV4 interior blood near the steering column being planted by law enforcement. Bobby Dassey planted that. No, Bobby Dassey didn't plant that. Because then Bobby Dassey would have to say, hey, Steven, I need your sweat. And then Bobby Dassey would have had to planted that sweat under that hood latch before it gets to the state crime lab. In any point, in any conjunction, in any opposition to this motion, Steven Avery, alleging Bobby and dismissing law enforcement, the state and their motion can say, even though Steven Avery alleges Bobby Dassey planted blood in the front of the RAV4, Steven Avery is still stating that law enforcement planted sweat under the hood latch. Now, if Steven Avery is going to dismiss law enforcement planting anything around the RAV4 in the interior, but still holds that law enforcement plants sweat under the hood, Steven Avery's theory on Bobby Dassey planning is not adequate. And if it's inadequate, they're going to toss it. And they're going to toss it because Steven Avery in the motion does not place blame to Bobby Dassey on the hood latch sweat. She didn't think that went through very well. Now, y'all might think I'm nuts, but if I'm Josh Call and Company Attorney General's office and I'm trying to rug sweep the dog shit out of this Kathleen Zellner motion for Brady violations and third-party Denny, I've already successfully done it. And I'm not Josh Call and Company, but I do know specifics surrounding this case, and I do know what Kathleen Zellner is up against, and I have myself dismiss this motion if I'm the state of Wisconsin, and I think I've dismissed it pretty successfully. We're speaking hypotheticals here, and without a smoking gun evidence, the Bobby Dassey theory isn't gonna fly. So Kathleen Zellner, when you want to wake up, grow some balls, let them drop, and blow the whistles that little balls Buden and little balls Drizzen and little balls Finley didn't blow the whistle on, you come see me and we'll get Steven Avery out, because there's things you're not attacking, and there's things you're not attacking because you believe Jerry Buden is an upstanding person, but he's not. And you called his bluff, or you didn't call his bluff, and now Steven Avery is in prison, and I'm the nut job. Guess I'll be the nut job, but for now, signing off, having good coffee, have a great day. Till next time, start seeing with better eyes, look beyond Avery Road.